Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Ali Abbas Ghazalbash and I would like to welcome you back to our series of programs on biology. Today's topic of discussion, my dear students, is a very common yet complex process which occurs within every living cell, the process of respiration. Now, dear students, you all know that all living cells respire. Respiration refers to a series of complex oxidation-reduction reactions, whereby living cells obtain energy through the breakdown of organic substances. Now, you can see from the overall reaction of respiration that glucose is oxidized to 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, whereas 6 molecules of oxygen are reduced to 6 molecules of water. As a result, energy is obtained and released in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, the energy that is obtained by the breakdown of glucose is used for different activities within your body. Now, from this reaction, you may also recall our discussion on photosynthesis and realize that, in fact, the reaction is the exact opposite of that of respiration, where energy in photosynthesis is used to make sugar and oxygen, but here in respiration, sugar is broken down, producing energy and carbon dioxide. The process of respiration may be better understood by analyzing the behavior of a long-distance runner who breathes deeply and rhythmically as his legs keep up the steady beat along the track. Internally, his body responds smoothly to match the pace of the motions. Oxygen flowing into his lungs enters the blood, passes through many blood vessels until it is delivered to the cells of his tissue, and in this case, it's his muscles. The muscles are ready to receive the oxygen and contain an abundance of mitochondria, the site of cellular aerobic respiration, which starts producing ATP as soon as oxygen has appeared. The mitochondria are fueled by glucose present in the cytoplasm in the form of glycogen. Respiration, however, is not as simple as that and involves numerous chemical reactions and steps controlled by various enzymes, all of which are present in the mitochondria, the site of respiration in eukaryotic cells. Now, dear students, since the entire process of respiration takes place inside the cells, it is known as cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, which includes all the various metabolic pathways by which carbohydrates and other metabolites are broken down with the release of energy and in the form of ATP. Now, aerobic cellular respiration refers to those pathways that require oxygen, as indicated by the word aerobic, and result in a complete breakdown of metabolites to carbon dioxide and water. This figure here shows an overall equation of aerobic cellular respiration, a process that usually begins with glucose. The overall equation for aerobic cellular respiration is the coupling of glucose breakdown to ATP buildup. Now, during respiration, the breakdown of one glucose molecule results in the production of 38 ATP molecules. The process itself utilizes 2 ATP molecules, therefore the net gain of respiration is 36 ATP molecules. Now, my dear students, you should know that aerobic cellular respiration does not occur all at once. Instead, glucose is broken down in 4 phases: glycolysis, transition reaction, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport system. Now let us discuss each step in detail. Glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose to 2 molecules of pyruvate. Now, oxidation, which is the removal of hydrogen atoms, provides enough energy for the immediate buildup of 2 ATP molecules. Glycolysis takes place outside the mitochondria and does not utilize oxygen. The other stages of aerobic cellular respiration take place inside the mitochondria, where oxygen is utilized. Dear students, you can see here in this figure that as glycolysis begins, 2 ATP molecules are used to activate glucose, a 6-carbon molecule that splits into 2 3-carbon molecules, each of which is phosphorylated. From this point on, each 3-carbon molecule undergoes the same series of reactions, and you can call these steps as energy investment steps, as 2 ATP molecules have been used up. If we go further, we can see that the oxidation of metabolites results in the production of 2 NADH molecules, and the energy is released to allow for the formation of 4 ATP molecules. As discussed earlier, glucose, the 6-carbon molecule, is unstable and readily splits into 2 3-carbon molecules, that is, phosphoglyceraldehyde, PGAL. Each PGAL molecule then picks up an inorganic phosphate group from the surrounding cytoplasm to become diphosphoglyceric acid, which is oxidized to yield hydrogen, which is then picked up by the molecule of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD. The NAD, which is an oxidized molecule, then becomes reduced to NADH2, and it is one of the main hydrogen carriers in cellular respiration. The 2 molecules of the 3-carbon compound PGA then enter the several chemical reactions during which phosphate groups are transferred to 4 ADP molecules, generating 4 ATP molecules. I hope that you remember that since 2 ATP molecules were required to start the initial activation of glucose molecules, and now 4 have been produced, therefore the net gain of glycolysis is 2 ATP molecules. And the last step of glycolysis yields these 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, or pyruvate. The second phase is the transition reaction phase. Now, during this phase, pyruvate, produced in glycolysis, is oxidized to an acetyl group, and carbon dioxide is removed. Since glycolysis ends with 2 molecules of pyruvate, the transition reaction occurs twice, once per glucose molecule. Now, as you have just learned that the transition reaction releases carbon dioxide, it is called so because of the fact that it connects glycolysis to the third phase, the Krebs cycle. Now, in the transition reaction, the conversion to 2 3-carbon acetyl groups is coupled with the attachment to a coenzyme A, and carbon dioxide is given off. This is an oxidation reaction in which the electrons are removed from the pyruvate by an enzyme that uses NAD as the coenzyme. And NAD plus becomes NADH2 as acetyl coenzyme A is formed. In this figure, you can see that the different places of the cell where the phases of cellular aerobic respiration takes place. 1, glycolysis, takes place in the cytoplasm. Then the second part, which is the transition reaction, and the third, the Krebs cycle, take place in the matrix of the mitochondria. Whereas the fourth stage, the electron transport system, takes place within the cristae of the mitochondria. The third phase of the glucose breakdown is known as Krebs cycle. Now, the Krebs cycle is a cyclic metabolic pathway located in the matrix of the mitochondria. The Krebs cycle is so named after the British scientist Sir Hans Krebs. Now, the Krebs cycle begins with the molecule of citrate. For this reason, it is also known as the citric acid cycle. Now, during the Krebs cycle, eventually, the high-energy pyruvate molecule is broken down completely to simple end products, carbon dioxide and water, having released most of its energy along the way. During the Krebs cycle, in the presence of oxygen, the 3-carbon pyruvic acid or pyruvate molecule oxidizes with NAD molecules, accepting 2 hydrogen atoms and losing 1 carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. As already mentioned, it is actually the acetyl-CoA that enters the Krebs cycle. The acetyl group separates from the coenzyme A to combine with the 4-carbon molecule called oxaloacetate. The result is a 6-carbon compound, of course, known as citric acid or citrate. The citric acid undergoes a series of cyclic changes, beginning with the conversion to ketoglutarate, then to succinate fumarate, and finally to oxaloacetate. The cycle will continue as long as acetyl-CoA is available. The last phase of cellular aerobic respiration is the electron transport system. The electron transport system, located in the cristae of the mitochondria, is a series of carriers that pass electrons from one to the other. Some of the protein carriers of the system are cytochrome molecules. Therefore, the system is also termed as the cytochrome system. Here again, similarities with the electron transport system of photosynthesis can be drawn. In the respiration electron transport system, the electrons that are released are carried by NAD and FAD molecules, as you can see in this figure. When the NADH+ molecule is the next molecule which receives the electrons, it is reduced. In short, we can say that during the cytochrome system, the electrons that have been accepted by the NAD and FAD molecules are now passed along a series of electron carriers like cytochrome B, cytochrome C, cytochrome A, etc. These cytochromes are alternatively reduced as they receive electrons and oxidized when they give up the electrons, with the gain or loss of energy. Now here again, each acceptor is at a lower energy level than its predecessing one, and therefore energy is released during this process and formed in the ATP molecule. At the end of the chain, the electrons are accepted by oxygen, which combines with the 2 hydrogen ions to produce the water molecule. So we can conclude that at the end of the series of reactions during aerobic respiration, glucose molecule is completely broken down in 4 phases into carbon dioxide, water, and energy is released in the form of ATP. Dear students, we have just discussed aerobic cellular respiration, where oxygen is used to oxidize or completely break down a glucose molecule to release energy. Carbon dioxide and water are produced as byproducts. Now we will discuss anaerobic cellular respiration or fermentation. So far, dear students, we have learned that the result of glycolysis are 2 molecules of pyruvate which are formed. Now the process of fermentation, which is the breakdown of sugars in the absence of oxygen, consists of glycolysis plus one other reaction: the reduction of pyruvate to either lactate or lactic acid or alcohol, and the end product of carbon dioxide is the byproduct of this reaction, as shown in this figure. Now, certain anaerobic bacteria, such as lactobacillus, help in the manufacture of cheese, consistently produce lactate or lactic acid in this manner. Other bacteria anaerobically produce chemicals of industrial importance like isopropanol, butyric acid, propionic acid, acetic acid, which is also known as vinegar. Yeasts are a good example of organisms that generate alcohol and carbon dioxide during the breakdown of carbohydrates through the process of fermentation. Yeasts are also used in bread making, where they ferment flour in the form of dough and produce alcohol and carbon dioxide. The alcohol vaporizes in the high temperature, and the carbon dioxide helps to raise the dough to form loaves of bread. Anaerobic respiration also occurs in the muscles of living things during fast and often extensive exercising. This is because that even though the amount of energy produced through anaerobic respiration is less than that produced by aerobic respiration, the process is often quicker. Therefore, when your body needs energy very quickly, then as a result, especially when you're exercising rigorously, the muscles in your body start respiring anaerobically. This results in the buildup of lactic acid in your muscles, which causes cramps to occur. This is why some athletes who have not trained properly suffer from cramps halfway through their routine. Now, after the rigorous exercise, you sometimes find yourself breathing very heavily for a long time. This is because your body needs the excess oxygen to break down the lactic acid buildup in your muscles through the process of aerobic respiration. Dear students, so far we have been discussing cellular respiration. Now we will discuss the process of gaseous exchange, the actual process of breathing, using the human example. Now, during inspiration, that's the breathing in process, and expiration, which is the breathing out process, air is pushed into and out of the lungs through a series of cavities, tubes, and openings by the action of certain muscles. The respiratory tract consists of various parts, as illustrated. These parts are the nostril, the nasal cavity, the pharynx, epiglottis, glottis, larynx, trachea, bronchus, lungs, diaphragm, pulmonary venule, pulmonary arteriole, alveolus, and the associated capillary network. Now, if we analyze the nose first, it consists of two nasal cavities with specialized ciliated cells in the narrow part of the nasal cavities acting as receptors. The nasal cavity opens into the upper portion of the pharynx, also known as the nasopharyngeal region, or nasopharynx, which is visible in these figures. As the air passes in along the air passage, it is filtered, warmed, and moistened. Now, filtering is accomplished by the coarse hair and cilia in the region of the nostrils and by the cilia alone at the rest of the nose and trachea. Air taken in by either the nose or the mouth enters the pharynx, which is known as the throat. In the pharynx, the air passage, that is the trachea, and the food passage, that's the esophagus, are temporarily joined. The trachea, which lies in front of the esophagus, is normally open, allowing the passage of air. The trachea closes only during swallowing with the help of the epiglottis, allowing the food to enter the esophagus only. The larynx, or voice box, lies on top of the trachea. At the top of the larynx is an opening called the glottis. A flap of tissue, which is known as the epiglottis, which helps direct the food and air into their respective tubes, i.e. the esophagus and trachea, is present on top of the glottis. The trachea is a tube held open by C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Cilia that projects from the epithelium of the trachea keep the lungs clean by sweeping mucus and debris towards the throat. The trachea divides into two bronchi, each of which enters each lung. The bronchi then branch into a large number of smaller passages called bronchioles. Now, each bronchiole then terminates into a multitude of air pockets or sacs called alveoli, and it is these alveoli that make up the large percentage of the lungs. This diagram of the air passages in the lungs gives you an idea of how complex a structure and a network that nature has created in a very artistic way and scientific manner. Dear students, you may also be surprised to know that there are approximately 300 million alveoli with a total cross-sectional area of 60 to 70 square meters in each lung. Each alveolar sac is made up of simple squamous epithelium cells surrounded by blood capillaries. Gaseous exchange occurs between the air in the alveoli and the blood in the capillaries, where oxygen diffuses in and joins with the hemoglobin molecule that carries it to various cells of the body for respiration, and carbon dioxide diffuses out and is exhaled through the same passage. Dear students, with this we've come to the end of our program. I wish to thank you once again for your attention. Until we meet again, wish you the very best. Khuda Hafiz.